Hello and welcome to my today's video of the series Lessons of War, in which I describe everything that I have learned during these 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. And my today's video is going to be about death, as I have announced in the previous video. And it is a topic which is really hard to speak about and also really hard to reflect upon. And this might be one of the most difficult videos that I am going to make, but still I'm embracing myself. I will be able to do it, I believe in it. So the topic of death is usually the thing that we tend to avoid as long as we can, till the last second, as long as it comes to our life, when we lose someone that we love, or when we get close to death ourselves, when we have a near-death experience, or when we have some accident in which we survive by chance. And until then, people tend to live as if death doesn't exist, as if we will never die. And still the fear of death stays inside of us as a huge shadow inside of our psychics, because our subconscious always knows that the end of our life is going to be death. So it creates a lot of tension and it creates a lot of fear that we can't even recognize because it is in the shadow. The thing is that why I call it lesson of war, because in Ukraine it is impossible to avoid this topic whatsoever, because I left Ukraine at the beginning of the full-scale war, and then I came back after 4 months. And one of the first things that I needed to make my mind about, or make my peace about, was the fact that, well, I could be killed any second, more or less, because my city is situated more or less comparatively close to the border with Russia, and the Russians could use almost, and still can and still do, use almost anything that they can on the cities like mine. So they use ballistic missiles, they use cruise missiles, they use kamikaze drones, like huge kamikaze drones, Shahed drones, with explosions, and that's it. They cannot use aviation bombs on us, luckily, but there are cities on which they can use aviation bombs, and that's one of the most devastating things, actually. So it's not always happens so that we hear an air raid alert, we have the time to go to the shelter, and then the attack begins. Very often the city gets attacked before we even get the air raid alert, which means that we don't quite have a chance to even hide. So it's just, you hear an explosion and the air raid alert at the same time. So one of the things that I needed to make my peace about was that I could be killed any minute. And I remember my first experience with reflecting upon death was when I just came back to Ukraine, and I came across this practice that it was said that special forces militaries do that. I'm not sure if they do it or not, but it's said that you can just lay down and imagine that you are dead already. And I remember I did it, and it felt so good. It felt really peaceful. I felt that there are no worries, there is nothing to worry about, and there is no time, and there is no hurry, and there is no pain. Like, there is literally nothing to be afraid of anymore if you are dead already. And it kind of felt like a release, like relief. And I thought, okay, that maybe death is not such a bad thing. Because before that, for me, the topic of death didn't quite exist, I would say. But at that time, it was probably my first time that I thought, okay, that maybe death is not as bad as I thought it is. And later, like years later, this year I think, or maybe last year in 2024, it was in 2024, I was already going further in my journey of a civilian living in Ukraine. Also, I was going further in my journey of a yoga teacher and a yogi. And I have had certain spiritual experiences as well. So sometimes I would have like meditations in which I would see something. I believe that it's my way of connecting with my subconscious. So the subconscious, which is connected to the rest of the subconscious. And sometimes when I have a question, when I have a topic which I want to uncover, sometimes it comes to me, like some insight or some realization comes to me in the form of such meditation, when I see something that explains everything to me. So that was a kind of a meditation which I came to from a very unpleasant place. And it was, I remember I was reading a book called Poppy Wars, and there was a description. It's like a fantasy book about war as well, and there was a description of like there were two countries which were in the war, and one of the countries invaded another country, Federation, and they occupied a city, and they did like horrifying atrocities in that city. There were like, in this book, there were like two whole pages of maybe even more, of descriptions of what they were doing. And I was reading those descriptions of what they were doing to the civilians, like really horrifying thing. I'm not gonna quote any of them here, but really horrifying things. And I realized that it's the same thing, like the same energy that I feel when I read about what Russians have done on the north of Ukraine before the north of Ukraine was deoccupied. There were also like horrible things. Sometimes I would just read a name of the article and not be able to sleep at night because of what I read, because it would just stay in my head and I just couldn't get rid of it. And it was actually the same thing of what I read in the autobiography of someone who survived Holocaust. So it was all the same energy. It was this energy that was doing horrifying things to other people. And I was like, okay, but why does it resonate in me so much? Like, why? What is it in me that it resonates with? So at some point, I felt like it was like a mortal tendency, like a tendency that led to death, a tendency that wanted death, a tendency that was attracted to death. That in some situations, it was expressed in the form of atrocities. But in me, it also had its place, and it was expressed in the behaviors which were mortal, not vital. And I was like, okay, so I have this tendency in me, and it is also, by the way, described in Women Who Run with the Wolves. There is a wonderful book, I recommend it to you, but there is this description of this mortal tendency. And I was like, okay, so I have this tendency. I want to understand what it is. I want to, dive deeper into it. And so it happened so that I meditated a lot. I had a lot of practices and blah, blah, blah. And I felt that I can go into a meditation to see what this mortal tendency is about. So I did it. I went into it. And it was a very unusual meditation. I felt like I saw it as I came to the gates of a city. And again, I remind you that I interpret it as my way of making this edge between my conscious and subconscious thinner to the point that I can actually read something from the subconscious. So I believe that it was one of the situations like this. And in this meditation, I saw how I come to the gates of the city. And I know that when I come to the city, I will see all of these atrocities. I will see the horrifying things that have been done to people. So I open the gate and I go through the city and I see all of these things and I feel all of this energy of, horror and hate and fear and everything that surrounds this energy, this mortal tendency. But I knew that I need to go through it. And I was just going through it. Inside of this meditation, I was just focusing and going through it. And at some point, I left the city and I started to go towards something that looked like, these Chinese buildings with roofs like that. It was like tiny wooden building, like somewhere high on the hill. So I was going towards it, and it was like a certain period when I was just concentrating and meditating as if I'm going towards this building. And I knew all of this time, I knew that in this tiny building, I will understand the nature of death. So I was concentrating and meditating to get to this building. And I remember thinking inside of this meditation that this building is so tiny. It was as if, I would open the door and I come into it and there would be no space for anything except for me. And I was thinking, how is it possible that in this tiny building I will understand the nature of death? But I was just going forward. And then I came up to this building and there was nothing. I remember that I was passing by, the forest and then like the flowers and then like something else. I don't remember what. But when I came to this building, there was nothing around it. And I came into this building inside of my meditation and I felt all I saw was light. And I felt as if I didn't exist at the same time as I existed in everything that exists. So it's like this sense of unity. I think it's like a sense of ecstasy or something like this. And it lasted just a split second. I think it lasted just a split second. It also felt like it lasted forever. So it was a very, 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 it was the most unusual experience that I have had in my spiritual journey. And I remember thinking, okay, so if death is like this, if death is actually a return to unity, then why are we afraid of death? And I received, in this state of meditation, I received this answer immediately. Because if people do not know their purpose, if they do not know that there is a purpose of them being here, of them being on the earth, if they know that death is actually an ecstasy, is actually something very pleasant, they would just kill themselves. They would be just, like, why suffer? Why try? Why go through all of the experiences that we go through on earth when you can just finish it all and be done with all of it? So I realized in this meditation that this fear of death is actually a defensive mechanism which protects us from killing ourselves, which doesn't it's like a curtain around death that doesn't let us see what death is actually about until we come to the understanding that yes, death is something very beautiful, but we don't have to go into it because here we have a purpose. Here we have something to do. And actually our embodiment on earth, our life on earth, our incarnation on earth is actually a huge prize because it is very intense, because it is very sensual and sensitive, because it is very experiential, because it is separated. It is the feeling of separation which we hate, but also which gives us all the opportunities to create, to go through the challenges, to feel pleasure, to feel pain, to have all of these complexities, to face the nature of human, of like this double nature of human, a human as a spirit and a human, as an animal, basically. So I realized that this thing that I called a mortal tendency was actually a fear of death, which was there. It was a very mechanical thing. It's basically like it's mechanics. So as long as you don't know why you're here on Earth, you need to have certain mechanism which is going to stop you from going into death. Because if you don't like your life, and most people don't like their lives, and if you know that with death nothing ends, but actually it's just, an experience of unity and connection that you could only feel in the best moments of your life. If you know that and you don't have this fear of death, you'll just go into death, which is not the purpose. The purpose is to live your life as long as you need to be here, to learn the lessons that you need to learn here, to overcome challenges that you have to overcome here, to live through your karma that you have here, and so on, to really enjoy this life, to play this game to the fullest, to play it as much as you can. So it's a mechanism. You have the fear of death as long as you don't know that you have a purpose. Because otherwise, you would just want to end this life because it is full of suffering and a lot of unpleasant things. And death is actually an ecstasy. But as soon as you get the feeling that this has a purpose, that there is a goal in your life, that there is something that you can do here and that it's fun, it's something your soul chose for you, then you don't have to be afraid of death anymore. This mechanism can go away, and it clears out a lot of space for other things. I remember that after this experience, it took some time before I integrated it, but after this experience, I became actually fearless. Well, I can't say that I'm completely fearless. It's not the case. Of course, when I hear explosions, my body reacts, and I don't feel very bad when I hear explosions. But at the same time, I don't have fear of the future, and I don't have fear of the unknown. Because, what is the worst thing that is going to happen? The worst thing is death, but death is not a bad thing. I'm not afraid of death anymore. So it's it's such a liberating feeling of I don't know how to explain it. I hope I'm transmitting it with my vibe a little bit and you can understand what I'm talking about. But it is a very liberating feeling that allows to actually enjoy life in any conditions that you have. Me, in my conditions that I have, I remember it clicked. I realized that everything that is happening to me right now is just more intense level of the game, I just chose a different level. Not the average, but maybe a little bit, more difficult. And I started to enjoy it. Even the pain, even the unpleasant, these uncomfortable situations, they started to make sense because everything started to make sense. And it's a very, I'm speaking about all of this and I realize that this is not the mood that you speak about death in, usually. But this is exactly how I feel. This is exactly how I feel when speaking about it, because I had that experience. And I hope it's very clear that it's not an invitation to go into death, because you have to go into death when your time comes, after you have done everything that you needed to do on this earth, because your life has a purpose, and we will talk about it in 3 videos. But it is also, the idea is that the death is not scary if you know why you live here. And there is also actually the opposite thing. When I first realized that I believe that with this life, with death, nothing ends, when I started to believe in reincarnation and I started to believe in this spiritual lineage, that we go from one life to another, learning our lessons and, creating and overcoming karma, I felt that this was the first time when I started to actually love my life, because I was like, okay, so if this life is not the only one that I have, and I can go into another one, like anytime, I started to think about, but what is my life like? And I was like, but I love this life. I like the person that I am in it. I like my family. I like what is happening around me. Even though it is, I know it sounds crazy, but it is so intense and so interesting that I like it. Despite the fact that from a human point of view, from my general point of view, from my regular point of view, as I used to have it before the war, I would never say that it's something good. And I believe that probably the topic of death would be different for different people. And maybe if you did your meditation, you would see something different. But actually, it is very similar, like what I felt and what I saw in this meditation is very similar to how people describe their near-death experiences. The people who had their near-death experience, they describe this sense of calm and unity, and that there is something good that is going to happen soon. So I kind of believe that it's more or less universal experience, that death is not actually a bad thing. And I think that when you get rid of fear of death, you get rid of most of the fears. And a huge part of tension from the psychics, it just disappears, and the life becomes so much easier and so much interesting and so much more fulfilling. You can actually start living now without the fear of death. So this is the point of this video. And speaking about, different pillars of the internal core, as I was speaking about it in the previous videos, this one, it took away most of the fear, yes. And it planted in me this understanding that nothing bad is actually going to happen, because whatever happens, like what is the worst thing that can happen? It's death, but death is not a bad thing. So whatever happens is all right. And yeah, that's probably all that I'm going to say in this video. It kind of happened to be more emotional than I expected to be. It's very weird. Whenever I sit down to make a video, I have no idea what it's going to be like. Like, is it going to be like the previous one when I didn't have a single emotion in me? Or is it going to be like this one when I feel so excited speaking about death? It's so weird. It's such a weird experience of making these videos. But still, yeah, I'm going to let them be as they are. Thank you for watching. This is the 5th video, I think, that's right in the middle. We have 4 more to go and maybe some conclusion. So see you next time. Thank you for watching. Share your comments. Maybe you had near-death experience, share it as well. And also tell me what you think about death and how you feel about death. And maybe you can figure out something that could make you feel better. Yeah, thank you for watching. See you next time.